Yes, thank you.
And yes, and I put the new collaborative book on there. So what happened is, of course I've had a crazy story anyway of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the point of God, I felt God saying, you need to write a book. And, I had spoken at a couple different churches. People had
Right.
asked me, like, I never went asking, right? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to share my junk, Lord. I'm going to throw me under the bus. And God's
Right.
like,
I
he's
don't
like,
think so. Right.
he said, that is my glory. He
Mm-hmm.
said, if anyone asks you, you don't say no because I've sent them. It's
Amen.
not in my own power. And I think that's why it's when you reached out, I'm like, so sometimes I'm like, yes, because you're scared, right?
I know.
So I was just turning in clothes at Plato's Closet and trying to get money because I was a single
Mm-hmm.
mom, 3 kids. And the
Right.
lady's like, this was the very first time I spoke. She said, you have a story. She says, I don't know what it is, but here's my email.
Oh, she said that to you?
Yes. And she said, I think you're our next speaker at church. I was like,
Oh, wow.
I do not know you. And it was the
Oh,
Sylvania Church of
wow.
God Prophecy. I was like, well, okay. With the name of it, I'm like, okay, maybe she got some gifts.
Wow.
I said, well, I go, but you don't know. And she's like, but I do, I think you need to send me your story. And I'm like, okay, that's crazy. Well,
Wow.
I was supposed to speak down in this meeting room in the basement, like of the
Mm-hmm.
church, and they ended up having something go wrong down there, and they put me on the podium in the essentially the pulpit in the front of the
Oh,
church.
wow. Yes.
And the pastor said, you know what, we got your story, and I'm going to give you the whole hour, right?
Wonderful.
For Sunday morning, I was like, oh my. So I get up there, and as I'm up there, I'm sitting there. I have all these things written down, and I'm looking out, and it's that quiet, like, oh my gosh. And I felt like I was going to get nervous laughter, right?
Right.
And I'm like, and I all of a sudden the Lord brings back to me when I was 5 on the side of the road playing. This church bus stopped, this little white
Mm-hmm.
bus stopped and gave me a little Bible, and he said, you're going to speak from the pulpit one day.
Mm.
And from all of those little mishaps, I was at the pulpit, right? And I was like, oh
Wow.
my gosh, God quickened that from 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I just stopped for a minute. I'm like, oh my gosh. I didn't even know back then what a pulpit was, but I remembered him saying it at 5. He never wrote
Right.
it down, but in it it said that it says sin will keep you from this book and this book will keep you from sin.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that in there, and I had a little tiny New Testament, right? I
Right.
kept it. I still have it. Um and I think it's right up there. And so I have this little tiny, and I carried it with me. And so at the time, he didn't know, I was in an abusive home. I was with
Mm-hmm.
my fourth or third stepdad.
Okay.
Uh, you know, I was always alone. And so it's so crazy, all this stuff that I grew up with, and then all the abuse. And then I've been on my own since I was 13. So my mom married her fourth husband, and he didn't want kids.
Oh, wow.
So she goes, I married him over the weekend. You're going to have to move out.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved out,
Oh my
stayed
God.
in
I know you
tents.
had to be just devastated.
Oh my gosh, I thought, well, there's me going, you know what? He's gross anyway. He
Mm-hmm.
was, just he was such a perfectionist. He would just watch you. If you walk on the grass, he'd go straighten it in the yard. Like, it was weird.
Mm.
And I'm like, I just got out of having the third stepdad, which I called dad, and he was starting to, I was growing up, and he was doing stuff to where my mom then was cheating and leaving us, my
Mm.
sister and I with him.
That was
And
the third one.
I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Right? And
Right.
so she's like, "Kiss your dad goodbye for work." I'm like, "Mm-mm." Like, it was just one of those. So I was like happy to be out. This guy was just emotionally abusive. So I was like, you know what? I think I'd be better on my own. I thought I knew everything at 13, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was sleeping in my friends' parents' cars in their driveway. So I couldn't always stay the night because
Right.
someone would find out. So they would leave their cars open. I would sleep there and get on the bus in the morning.
Mm.
I would sleep in tents, boarded up buildings, and this was in Youngstown. So I grew up
Wow.
in Youngstown.
Okay.
It's pretty rough in Ohio. There's, the Bloods and the Crips and there was, well, of course, the Greek and Italian. There was
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of, right?
So it was a
It was
lot of stuff going on.
very dangerous, and I didn't know God, did not grow up with the Lord, didn't even know who God was, even though I had that little Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, had abused babysitters that took me to churches that were around because they said the devil lived in the dark corners, and then would put me in the corner in the basement if I was bad. Like there was
Wow.
crazy
Hmm.
trauma that even started to try and even keep me from God, right?
Okay. Even
I had,
after you left from your home,
yeah,
thinking that would be safer than you being there, but then it was like it became a magnet to other forces that you hadn't even dreamed of.
yes. And I was drinking. I thought I could, date. I was 16. I started dating a guy that was in a band at a bar. My friend
Mm-hmm.
parents owned a bar. So I was there all the time, learned how to play pool. I was hustling for money,
Right.
um, making money playing pool. And so started dating an atheist that was 21. I was
Mm-hmm.
16. And
Okay, so it's
I,
what,
I
5 years.
am telling you, right? So 5 years apart, how God had, how he even got me through from all of those things. I still didn't know the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Was drinking all the time at the bar, growing up that way. Of all things, by the time I was 19, my the atheist boyfriend's mom was a Christian, but she never mentioned
Really?
God.
But had never mentioned God.
She just
All
loved
three
me.
years.
Yeah, loved me, let me sleep there, sleep with her son. I was drinking, I was doing all kinds of things, but she never
Mm-hmm.
judged, right?
Right.
But she loved me in it. And then she said, I have a mother-daughter banquet at church, and she has three sons. She goes, I don't
Hmm.
have a daughter. Do you want to go?
Hmm.
I just wanted a mom. I was
Right.
like, yeah.
Right.
So I went and I learned about who God was, and it
Mm-hmm.
just that wrecked me that somebody would love me like that,
Right.
dis- despite thinking I was less than, right?
Exactly. Oh
And
my
so
word.
I'm telling you, I was like, okay, that wrecked me, and I left there and I started going to church every Sunday.
Mm.
So as they were doing these altar calls, it's a little tiny Bible church.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing Just As I Am,
Oh yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
and every altar call, and they're saying anybody who doesn't know Jesus. My heart's pounding out of my chest every Sunday, and I reject it. I was like, I am not going up there.
Hmm.
But I would start crying every time and leave in the middle
Every
of that.
time they play Just As I Am.
They had to say, oh, there goes sunshine. They're like, wait for it, wait for it, wait
Oh
for it. For
Jesus.
2 months. I did it for
Mm-hmm.
2 months. I
Mm.
did not know that. I felt him calling me, but I
Mm.
couldn't do it because
Mm.
I felt
Mm.
like I didn't want anyone to know. Right.
Right.
So finally, guess what happened? So Easter comes, and I learned that he died, that Jesus died for me. And that
Mm-hmm.
broke me, that someone would love me that much to lose their life. And I couldn't take it. I just ran to the front and I said, they're like, do you believe? I said, I need this Jesus person.
Right.
And it was almost like an instant download from heaven,
Mm.
that I knew that I said, I don't know how to live. I didn't know I was
Gotcha.
abused. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what I was doing was wrong. Didn't know
Mm-hmm.
my body was precious. None of that
Right.
until that minute when I'm on the altar steps crying, saying, I don't know how to live. It was like he showed me everything that had been done to me and how wrong it was.
Mm.
And talk about a conversion process.
Really.
That broke me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know my body's precious. No one discipled me either after that.
Right.
So I just thought, I kept praying every day for my salvation because I thought I
Mhm.
lost it.
I see what you're saying, right? You didn't know, like you had it, you were secure. Yes, yes,
I
yes.
was like, oh shoot. So I tried not to sin so bad. And I'm like, I was at the bar and I'm telling
Hmm.
now I'm at the bar, same place. Cause I still don't know exactly that that's not really the way you should be treating your body. I'm just
Hmm.
telling the guy on the stool next to me about Jesus.
Hmm.
I was in there sharing, I was discipling. And so I'm like, well, you know what? If I drive home tonight, I said, we're all drinking, but I'm like, I'll drive because I'm going to heaven.
Right. Oh my word. Isn't that something?
And so the simplicity of what, thinking I'd lose it, I got, so Mother's Day came and there was baptism right after
Hmm.
Easter. So I got baptized, and I did not, I felt like it was holy water, right? So I wouldn't even shower for 3 days because I didn't want that water to be gone off of me.
Right.
I mean, the simplicity of salvation just blows my mind when I go back now and think about it, because now I'm filled with the Holy Spirit and gifts and other things. But it was so simple and so, that sacrifice. And then I was like, God, why didn't I have parents? And then I started asking him those questions. And he's like, I was there the whole time. I saw
Right.
you pull the daisies and he loves me not. I saw your first steps. I was there for all of that. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
you just have the honor of being raised by the Holy Spirit,
Amen.
right?
Amen. Yes, the Holy, like you said, the Holy Spirit. You had the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit helping to raise you and to parent you and to give you what you didn't have from home.
Yes. And he said, you know what? He said all that stuff because I said, well, there's alcoholism in my bloodline. There's all these things. And he said, your bloodline now is mine.
Amen. Washed in the blood of the Lamb.
Right? He said that
Yes.
DNA, that stuff. He's like, no, who is my mother and brother? And, who is.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I started to let him in. I didn't know authority. So it was very hard. That's why I said it's a miracle. Thank goodness that I was broken and soft and I never hardened myself. I never hurt myself or did hard drugs or thought of prostitution. God protected my mind from joining gangs, from being an atheist. I mean,
Yes.
he
Especially since her
protected me.
son was an atheist. It was divine protection for sure.
So I broke up with him, of course, after 4
Mm-hmm.
years. And she says, because he wouldn't ask me to marry him. I was 20, and
Mm-hmm.
she goes, you're not supposed to leave my son. And I said, I don't want this life.
Right.
I think I said, it's not about love. I love him, but
Right.
there is something different for me. I've been different all along. I've been
Mm-hmm.
set apart and there's something more.
Yes. But that's
So he
something
had
you realized your value.
right away, like
Mm-hmm.
God is like, and he said, and I said, okay, if you're my father, then I'm a princess because you're the king of kings.
Exactly.
I said, so wait a minute, I'm royalty. I mean, they stand a little taller and walk a little different. I said, but they still, it's being grounded, keeping your head in the heavens and walking on the earth and loving
Mm-hmm.
people. I said, so he taught me that time doesn't heal, but love does.
It sure does. You're absolutely right. Because when they say that quote, time heals all wounds, that
It's
is not
not.
true.
It is not
Because you could
true.
carry stuff for 40, 50, 60 years and it can still feel like it's yesterday. So it's not that it's time. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
it's so true.
You can
Yes.
carry that, bitterness.
I
And some people will carry it like it's a trophy. We could walk around like, look at what I got. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I got to tell you, so I was doing some things. I was kind of a flight risk for relationship. I would leave people before they could
Mm-hmm.
leave that abandonment issues.
Ah, okay. Like I'm out of here first. So you had
Yes,
that seed of abandonment and probably maybe a seed of rejection too in your
yes.
own house. You know how that
I didn't
abandonment
have a
and
voice.
rejection.
All of that, it kept my voice quiet. God said, you're a
Mm-hmm.
mouthpiece for me. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'm like Gideon or somebody need to speak for me or,
Mm-hmm.
or something. And so God said, in 2020, he said, you're going to, COVID came and I was doing suicide prevention for
Right.
teenagers, kids I was a cutter. I was an
Mm-hmm.
unsuccessful, thank goodness, tried to kill myself since I was 12.
Mm.
And I was like, I can't even do that right. I mean, I really felt like a failure. I had
Mm.
no idea what God was doing, but I was making bad decisions, and I still had bad fruit, and I felt like and I was like, but I was a street kid, and then God said, that is not your identity. You're using that to
Right.
make bad decisions. You're justifying your behavior from who you used to be. I'm like, dang it.
That is so
So
true.
I
That
was like,
is so true.
I can't do that anymore. He says, you are a pure, holy woman of God. And that is not who you are. So you can't make these decisions and say, oh, well, I was a street kid and use that anymore. That was that victim kind of thing. And
Yep.
that's why. So I went into the juvenile detention centers and I was talking to these kids and they're like, what do you know? And they're like this. And I'm like, well, let me tell you.
Right. You'd be surprised at what I know at this point.
I said,
Oh my goodness.
I had a gun to my head from a boyfriend at 15 on the
Mm-hmm.
streets. I mean, they tried to put acid, LSD in my food because I wouldn't do
Mm-hmm.
drugs. I couldn't eat
Wow.
anything. Like I had
Okay.
to not even drink the milk
Right.
uh, where I was staying because they're all doing this stuff and think it's funny.
And you
And
didn't know, you couldn't trust whether or not that, you had a solid drink. Yeah.
I had
Probably
to
the only
keep
thing you did
myself
water
safe.
out of the faucet. That's it, huh?
Oh, I'm telling you, I was like, so just that protection, I didn't like the feeling of not being in control. So I was
Mm-hmm.
my mother would give me medication like between 11 and 12, so I wouldn't cry and go to school because there was so much stuff going on at home.
Oh,
She didn't want anyone to find out, so she would drug me.
so she
And
drugged you.
yeah, so that
Wow.
I wouldn't say anything and I wouldn't cry. I would try and cry, and I was like, wow, this stuff really works. And I looked it
So
up
what
later
was
on.
it, like some anxiety medicine?
Antidepressants, anxiety combo, and she would just give me, like, cut it up and say, here, take this.
Oh, wow.
I was like, so that I
Without you
didn't.
even being seen by a professional
Oh,
psychiatrist or anything.
yeah, I was put on Zoloft. I was put on some other things, and they're like, "You're just in a well of pain." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So I honestly
Who
did. I
told you
did,
you were, who said you in a well of pain?
like, the doctor. The doctor. He's like, "You need to take this medication. You need the," and
Oh,
it would
your
make.
mother had already told him that. So she had already filled his head with whatever
Yeah,
she wanted him to know, not knowing that this was a cover up for her to
yeah,
keep you quiet and
yeah.
basically kind of like out of,
Yeah, I couldn't let anybody know from school that I didn't have parents, so I wasn't allowed to be in any sports. I couldn't be in anything,
mm,
couldn't be in any, I had to protect them. They taught me police were bad. I didn't know anything about the truth. I thought you get beat with a belt when you're bad.
mm-hmm.
Or my mom was hit in the face. He hit her in the face in front of me. I'm like, oh, she must have done something wrong. And that was
Now, which
normal.
husband was this one?
That would have been the third one. He did a lot of physical abuse with us, with me and my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he got more, of course, sexual because I was getting older and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't his, even though he was the only one I called dad. That kind of stuff. And then, after I got on my own, I would still pick these abusive boyfriends, right?
Your
That
brain went to what was familiar.
Yes, and they needed me and I felt small, right? I didn't have a
Gotcha.
voice. So I tell you what though, when I ended up going through divorce in 2015 and I looked at my kids, and that was a major turning point where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I got to finish school."
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to go back to college. I already had an associate degree. I
Mm-hmm.
graduated, believe it or not, I still graduated high school, top 4% of my class.
Even though you weren't with your
Yes,
at home anymore and you were
I was
living out on the
living
street and everything.
all different places, and I still graduated top of my class. Went to college for 15 months and had my associate degree, with honors with that. And then, started working contract work with different companies and doing well. And then met a guy at work, got married, and had my 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then sin entered in there, even loving God. It was just something to do. It wasn't really out of your heart. It was part of religion more
I was
so.
just about to ask you, was it like holding up an
Methodist,
image? You know how you can be
it
so caught up
was.
into
I said,
that image type
yes.
of thing?
I said, "Well, did you ever accept Christ? Was there a moment where you could stake in the ground and say, I know I'm going to heaven?"
Right.
And he's like, "No, we just always knew." I was like,
Wow.
yeah. And I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. And he goes, well, you just don't know the Bible because you didn't grow up with it. Let me lead. Right. And it became very
Mm-hmm. So
controlling.
you were thinking he was right at one point, right?
Yeah. So he's like, you just don't know any better. It's okay. I'm your lifeline. I'm like, okay.
Your lifeline. Oh my word. So he was so he thought he was God in essence.
Yes, yep, and so what God said, I tried to keep him and not let him leave, and
Mm-hmm.
God said, "Here's the cross, here's you, here's him. Now you've went around me and you're holding on to him when
Mm-hmm.
he will never come back to me if you don't let him go.
Gotcha.
Get back on your side of the cross. You've
Right.
now put your marriage as an idol.
Mm-hmm.
Get back over here and let me rescue you." This I didn't realize that marriage would have ruined me for the kingdom. And being in the way that I would have been very bound. I was very controlled. Um, I was becoming cynical, and yeah, it just was ruining me and then I got sick. I had a dream that there was the lion was outside the house, and I was
Mm-hmm.
going around. I was trying to shut the windows before he could get in, and he scooped up
Mm.
the dog and ate it real quiet outside, kept
Mm-hmm.
walking. By the time I got to the bedroom, he came out of the bedroom right past my husband in the dream and was going to eat me. I had to jump into the one room that was next to me. It was a bathroom with no windows. I'm like,
Wow.
so I shut it and I'm like, what is going on? And I ended up with I had a tumor went into the hospital. They said I had phalloidy sarcoma, so I had 10 months to live.
Mm.
And I'm like, wait a minute. And God said, you're out from under the umbrella of protection of your home.
Hmm.
The enemy came right past. You have no protection with your husband. He's not following me. There was some,
Mm.
and I had taken the leadership, which was not honoring God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was kind of sidestepping and kind of, I was being the leader and it wasn't the right place. So I apologized. He's like, well, can I remarry, if you die? And I'm like, sure. He just wasn't really, I said, will you pray for me? He's like, did you pray? I said, yeah. He goes, then that's good enough. Like he wouldn't even pray for me. There's a lot of spirits in the house. The kids were having night terrors.
Oh, I can believe it. Yeah, because now and how long did it take for you to realize that you were in a toxic relationship, you would say?
Well, it took me being sick to where they gave me 10 months. And I look at my kids my daughter was 3 and my twins were 7. And I went, oh my gosh, like, I need you to show up, God. I said, I know that you died not just for salvation, but healing. I said, I need a miracle. You said my DNA belongs to you. I remember that. I'm going to call on what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
was 33. So from 19 to 33, I'm like, I remember those things now. You're bringing them all back because they got me desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was laying on the couch and I had a dream that a little piece of gravel pushed its way out of my breast into my hand, a little black piece of gravel. And I'm like, and there was a hole with water coming out of it. And I'm like, what in the world? So in my dream, I go to the hospital and the doctor said, it's taken care of, go home. And I was like, God, what is that? And he said, I took the cancer out and this water is purifying you because you're mine. He said, you need to get a hold of your health, number one. The enemy has it. So the tumor had to come out either way because it was a 2.5-inch diameter, but I took the cancer out of it. He said, so now you're going to be a mouthpiece for me. It's time to speak. It's time to take control. I need you here a long time to do your work. He said, and you're falling apart and you're 33, right? He said, you need to wake up.
Gotcha.
So I had got a phone call within 3 days and the Mayo Clinic called and said, we got your tumor from the biopsy that showed the phalloidy sarcoma and they don't match. They said the tumor has no cancer in it.
Praise God.
I was like, I know you still get surprised when God comes through, right?
I know, even though we know what his word says, it's still like it's enough to like knock you off your feet.
He took the death sentence off of me. They gave me a death sentence.
Mm.
He said, now it's time to wake up. Let me rescue you. And I got to tell you, within a short amount of time, I had the church come in and pray while my husband was at work. They anointed the bed. They prayed over everything. And he was so uncomfortable when he came home. He called a friend, had me run to the store, and he moved out while I was at the store.
You kidding?
Mm-mm. He couldn't even stay in the house.
After they got through praying.
Yeah. I said, what happened? I called the pastor. I said, what? It went the wrong way. I thought you were saving my marriage.
It went the way that God wanted it to way, not the,
He goes,
don't we often think that we're, it makes me even think about with my marriage, when I was married, here I am thinking I'm saving the marriage, and God's like, no, baby, I'm saving you.
Yes, he said reconciliation of divorce. Divorce happens to you. Your purpose is the same. It happens to you. It's temporary. I do hate it, but it's temporary. He's like, that reconciliation of divorce is with me. It is not with him. I'm like, oh.
Right.
He's like, let me save you. And I was like, you guys, so the pastor's like, no, we prayed him out. I was like, what?
Oh, so the pastor said that is what they did.
Yes.
Yes.
I was like, oh my goodness. No wonder they kept me out of there. I was the pastor's wife was talking to me in the living room, and the leaders of the church and the pastor went in my bedroom, went in a
Isn't that something? And so he came home and when you went to the store and he had taken all his things and left.
Yep. Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute. And the kids, I felt bad because they were home. They watched it and they're like, Dad's like left. He took the bed of all things, the bed, the TV, like all the big stuff, all the big things, and left us with the little stuff. And I thought, you know what, I got to go with God. Well, when I decided to go back to school. This is where this whole thing exploded. So I knew I was going to end up writing a book eventually from that first time I talked, right?
Right.
But I just graduated. Let's see, it took 5 years. So from 2015 to, or 2016 until I just graduated in April. I started to, since I was doing suicide prevention, I was a youth leader at church, kind of more deliverance too, really praying for some heavy stuff that the church didn't understand. They're like, oh, bring Sunshine. She has experience. I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know how to pray for someone that's had this lifestyle. I've had this perfect life. That's what the youth pastor would tell me. I'm like, it's just a person. They're broken, right?
Right.
Anyway, doing all that work, God said, you can magnify your voice. Let's, do some online. So I started thinkingsunshine.com and started the social media and sharing my story and doing little things here so that those kids, I was on call for about 63 kids for suicide prevention, so that they could have daily encouragement.
That is wonderful.
Then it turned into college kids. Then it turned into veterans. Then it turned into executives stuck as a 6-year-old broken. And I thought, what in the world? So I started doing executive coaching after, as an internship between my associate degree and my bachelor's in 2019, and worked for a homeless shelter for a year to shift the culture there. And they lost their executives. So I trained the staff and loved them and taught them everything from fundraising to caring about the person, and looking at them broken and in survival mode, because I lived in survival mode my whole life. I said, there's a poverty mindset when you grow up poor. I mean, but I got to tell you, I just am coming out of the mindset. I'm finally stepping out of poverty. And I told the kids, I said, but there's a poverty mindset. I was still living in survival mode, even though I just have gotten my first couple checks.
Right.
That I need to change, because I'm still trying to, live in this way that I don't have the abundant life with Jesus. And it kept everything kind of locked down. And my voice, I was always quiet and afraid to speak. And so as I graduated as a non-traditional student, the newspaper found out just that I graduated as a mom in my 40s with 3 teenagers.
And which degree was this with now?
So I just got my degree in information systems and business analytics and intelligence. So I got 2 degrees.
Wow. 2 masters or
2 bachelor's degrees.
Okay. Wow. At one time. That's awesome.
Yeah. I got my little thing back here, and I graduated, goodness, with a 3 point, let's see, I was magna cum laude. So 3.75. So I know I didn't even care, but I was like, what, I'm honors? And so anyway, the newspaper came and interviewed me and wrote the article and posted it on my graduation day. And I thought, I applied for GM, and I had the Department of Defense. I had all kinds of offers.
That's all. And you were in your 40s. So once they put the article out there, that led people to start looking to you.
Well, as soon as I posted on LinkedIn, there was a group called the Female Lead. They have 3 million plus followers, and they pick women in the global influencers, and they share their statuses. They picked mine.
Really? That was a God thing.
I had favor with this group, and they shared it. It went global. Hundreds of thousands of people saw my post about graduation in April. It took me 2 weeks to respond to 2,000 messages that I got in my box.
Wow.
And they're
God set you up for sure. I mean, he gave you all that favor when you finished. Like you said, a single mom of 3 kids in your 40s.
And they didn't even know that I went through abuse and that I survived.
That you survived abuse. Yeah.
I mean, the trauma, the being on my own, and, still not having parents, or just growing up with God. I mean, so it was mind blowing, honestly. And then, so a couple of podcast people came up and said, hey, could you, in the UK, I became somewhat of a little celebrity in the UK. It was weird.
That is so cool.
And so now, then this publishing company reached out to me, and the book that I put on my website, they said, "Would you write a chapter in here? It's due in a week. These other
Oh,
women have had 6 months to write. You have
right.
a week to give me something, but I think you need to be in here because your story is getting pulled everywhere, and I think you should
Oh,
be
my
in here to be a
word.
published author because that's going to add to you. That's your value."
Yep.
Like I said, "Okay, I'll do it." I wrote it in a day. And it's all about God resurrecting that dream of a little girl being Cinderella, wanting to be loved, and God's character being sown in me so I didn't carry shame about wanting to be beautiful and accepted. And that's what it's about.
That is a
And
beautiful story. Oh my goodness. How would you define a toxic relationship? I always ask everybody that question.
mm, toxic relationship involves a couple things would be, of course, the abuser, any kind of mental, physical abuse, the
Mm-hmm.
controller that tries to control
Okay.
everything and tell you that what you're doing is not effective or not working. Or I had someone tell me you're not a good mom. I'm like, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
that is a lie. To try and gain control,
Right.
or yelling just to get you to be quiet. There's control even over that.
Yep. I
Soon
agree.
as
Yep.
you
That's a
get
form of
shut
bullying. Mm-hmm.
down.
Yep.
um, and the abandoner. So if they leave once, they're going to leave again. I hate to say it. I don't ever go backward because of that. I said, if you walk out, make sure, because I don't go backwards. I
Mm-hmm.
won't,
I'm
right?
like that too. I said, once God has rescued me out of Egypt, I'm out of there.
And and then of course narcissism, which is switching everything. So when it switches and then they're the victim when you're upset, and all of a sudden now they're upset and you're fixing them and
Mm-hmm.
go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Wait a
Yes.
minute. You're the one who messed up." And then you catch it.
Right.
When you can't have feelings and it turns into they get offended and now you're trying to explain yourself. So when you're not allowed to be free to feel,
Yes.
yeah.
I love all of that. Oh my goodness. Yes, those are all really good. And like you said, it'll be something that starts off that they've done. And then in order to not have the mirror up to them, the next thing you know, they flip it around. They gaslight you and flip it around. And next
Yeah.
thing you know, you're left in the conversation with you feeling guilty about a conversation that started off with talking about their actions.
Yes. I'm
But
like, wait.
right, like how did this script get flipped on me? But it started off with something inappropriate that they did or controlling, whatever. You're setting a boundary, and then it's like, well, you're insecure and jealous, and then you're like, wait, how do we get
Yeah.
from what it is you did? So then
And
you start taking those feelings.
And
Hmm.
when you love yourself, and I've learned that to set boundaries for my own safety and my own health,
Hmm.
like, then they take it as control. They're like, "You're so controlling." I'm like,
Yes,
"No,
that's what they call you, controlling when you set boundaries. Yep.
this is my safety. This is what I'm doing. If just let me go if you're not okay with that." And they never do. But
Hmm.
I would rather be alone than be with the wrong person.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh my word. So I got four rapid fire questions. Think of one song you love.
A song would be Gratitude by Brandon Lake.
Oh wow, gratitude. Two
Gratitude.
books.
2 books. Let's see, 2 books would be, I'm actually, Captivating,
Mm.
Aldridge, and it's about, yeah, being free to be the woman that God made us to be. Um, and probably, I'd have to say, the Bible. Gotta
Amen.
I gotta
Oh
say the
my
Bible.
word.
You know what? That is the book of life. And if we, God'll drop the scales and all of a sudden we can understand it. And it's like, wait, you just spoke to me.
Yes,
If
amen.
There was a son, he was devoured this hole that I've dug for me. You made a valley of grace where things would change, and maybe they'd take up the cross high again. The valley of grace was never the same after he had died. The love that refines. There's no sense in trying to do it on my own. He gave more than I could have known. He turned those valleys into places to learn, instead of burn and perish away. And nights never so cold without his grace. How could I say that I've seen the world from his great love? How could I know what he could love? How would I've seen what he had in store for me if I didn't give up and let him be my valley of grace, where things would change, and maybe they'd take up the cross high again. The valley of grace never was the same after he had died. The love that refines. So much I wish I could give back, but I'm not intact to be sharing all of that. You took the price to give me that life, and now it's never gonna fade away. When I see I need more of him, he whispers the sweetest of mercies upon my ears, and I won't go back the way it was again, 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 and now a valley of grace where things would change. I've seen the light, so valley of grace where things have changed. Oh, I've seen so much for me.